They didn't just whip her body. They tried to erase her name. Born without a morning, Sally Crane was born before the sun had the courage to rise. The night still covered the cotton fields of Alabama when her mother's pain began. There was no bed beneath her, only cold dirt. No candle, no midwife, no hands to help, only fear pressing down heavier than the darkness itself. Somewhere far across the plantation, a bell rang. That bell did not ring for birth. It did not ring for mercy. It rang for work. Ruth pressed her teeth into her hand to silence her scream. On this land, even childbirth was not an excuse to be loud. Sound brought punishment. Sound brought attention. And attention was dangerous. When the baby finally came, Ruth wrapped her in a torn cotton sack still warm from the fields. The child did not cry at first, as if she already understood where she had been born. Ruth leaned close and whispered a name into the child's ear. Sally. Not because it was written anywhere. Not because anyone would recognize it. But because naming a child was the last small freedom slavery had not yet stolen. Sally's earliest memories were not toys or laughter. They were sounds. The crack of a whip. The groan of tired bodies. The bell, always the bell. The Crane plantation stretched farther than a child's understanding. Cotton fields rolled like an endless white ocean, swallowing footsteps, swallowing time. To Sally, the fields felt alive, watching, waiting, never forgiving. By the time she could walk, she was already learning how not to be seen. Her mother taught her without words. Lower your eyes. Keep your hands busy. Never speak first. By 6 years old, Sally's fingers bled from picking cotton. The fibers cut into her skin, and the sun burned her neck until it blistered. No one noticed. Pain was common here, so common it was invisible. By 8, she learned silence could save her life. By 10, she understood fear had rules. At night, when the fields finally released them, Ruth pulled Sally close and told her stories. Not stories of freedom. Those were too dangerous. Instead, she told stories of survival. Some people survive by running, Ruth whispered. Some survive by bending, but never let them bend your name. Sally listened carefully, holding each word like it might disappear if she didn't remember it exactly. These stories were not dreams. They were instructions. Sometimes Ruth sang quietly, not songs of joy, but songs that carried memory, songs that belonged to people long gone. Sally didn't understand the words, but she felt their weight. Those songs stayed with her, even after Ruth didn't. One morning, the bell rang as usual. The sun rose as usual, but Ruth did not wake up. Sally shook her gently at first, then harder. Ruth's body was cold, her eyes open but seeing nothing. No one stopped working. No one stopped walking. Death, like pain, was normal here. An overseer glanced once and said, "Leave her." And that was it. No prayer, no goodbye, no time to grieve. Sally stood there, small and silent, holding a loss too heavy for her hands. Childhood ended that morning, not with tears, but with understanding. From that day forward, Sally belonged to the field, and the field never loved back. She grew quickly after that. Hunger does that to a child. So does fear. Sally learned the rhythms of the plantation like a second heartbeat. When to move, when to stop, when to disappear into the crowd. She watched everything and remembered more than she should have. The men who laughed when others suffered. The women who whispered prayers into the dirt. The children who vanished without explanation. Every face taught her something. Every loss carved her quieter. One afternoon, as the sun burned high and unforgiving, Sally collapsed in the field, her vision blurred. The cotton spun around her like falling snow. An older woman dragged her into the shade. "Don't close your eyes," she whispered urgently. If you sleep, you might not wake up. Sally forced her eyes open. She focused on the ground, on the ants carrying pieces of leaves bigger than themselves. Even then, she understood something important. Survival was not about strength. It was about refusing to disappear. That night, Sally lay awake staring at the wooden ceiling above her. She touched the place where her mother once slept. The space was empty, but the absence screamed. She whispered her own name quietly, Sally, just to make sure it still existed. Outside, the wind moved through the cotton fields, making them sound like whispers. Sally closed her eyes and imagined the fields speaking back. Not kindly, not cruelly, just endlessly. And somewhere deep inside, a question formed, one she would carry for the rest of her life. If the world could own her body, could it ever own her soul? The name written in blood. By the time Sally Crane turned 13, childhood had become a distant rumor. Her body had grown stronger, but her eyes had grown older. On the plantation, age was not counted in years. It was measured in pain. And Sally had learned more than most. That was the year they stopped calling her Sally. Not her name. Not her mother's whisper. They called her Crane Girl. It wasn't spoken with anger. It wasn't spoken with kindness. It was spoken like an object. A tool. A thing that worked. The overseer said it one morning while counting bodies in the field. Crane Girl, move faster. Sally flinched, just slightly. She lowered her head and obeyed. On the plantation, reacting was dangerous. Silence was survival. But inside her chest, something tightened. Her name mattered. Her mother had given it to her with shaking hands and whispered hope. To lose it felt like losing Ruth all over again. From that day on, Sally worked harder than ever. Quiet girls survived longer. She learned how to pick cotton without looking up, how to move her hands even when her mind drifted, how to disappear into labor so completely that even pain grew tired of following her. Summer came early that year. The sun burned hotter than memory. The cotton scratched her skin raw, and sweat soaked her dress until it clung to her like a second layer of dirt. One afternoon, Sally's hands began to shake. She had not eaten enough. She had not slept enough. She had not rested at all. The basket slipped. Cotton spilled onto the ground, bright white against dark soil, like snow falling where it didn't belong. The field went silent. The overseer turned slowly. He did not ask why. He did not ask if she was tired. The whip answered instead. The first strike burned across her back like fire. The second stole the air from her lungs. By the third, Sally stopped feeling individual blows. Pain became a single roaring thing, loud, endless, consuming everything. She did not scream. She pressed her lips together and stared at the dirt beneath her feet. She memorized the cracks in the soil. She counted her breaths, because screaming would not stop the pain, and silence sometimes shortened it. When it ended, Sally collapsed to her knees. The overseer walked away without another glance. The field returned to work. Pain, like death, delayed no one. That night, Sally dragged herself to the river. The water was cold, sharp against her skin. She knelt and washed slowly, watching the current turn dark with blood and dirt. Each movement sent pain through her back, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was still alive. An old man sat nearby on a fallen log. His hair was gray. His back bent like it had been shaped by years of labor. His name, if he still remembered it, had been taken long ago. People called him Elijah. "You don't cry much," he said quietly. Sally didn't look at him. "Crying don't change nothing," she answered. Elijah nodded. "Pain writes memory," he said after a moment. "But don't let it write your future." Those words stayed with her. That night, Sally couldn't sleep. Her back burned. Her body ached. But it wasn't the pain that kept her awake. It was the name, Crane Girl. She reached beneath her sleeping mat and felt around until her fingers touched something sharp, a nail she had stolen days earlier, without knowing why. Carefully, slowly, she pressed it into a piece of wood. The nail scraped. The wood resisted. Her hand shook. She carved the letters one by one. C-L-L-I-E. Then, after a pause, she added, C-R-N-E. Her hands cramped. Her back screamed. But she kept going until the name was complete. She stared at it in the darkness. If they owned her body, she decided, they would never own her name. Days passed. Weeks. Sally returned to the fields, her wounds healing into scars. Each scar told a story, but only to her. She watched the plantation more closely now. She noticed how names disappeared first, how people stopped speaking them, how silence erased identity faster than chains ever could. She whispered her name to herself sometimes while working. Sally Crane, just to keep it alive. One evening, Elijah sat beside her again. You remember who you are, he said. Sally nodded. That's dangerous, he added softly. But it's also powerful. She looked out across the field, the cotton glowing faintly under the fading sun. For the first time, Sally understood something important. The plantation could break bodies, but it struggled with spirits that refused to disappear. That night, Sally dreamed of her mother. Ruth stood in the field, whole and smiling, her hands clean. She said nothing, only nodded, as if to say yes. You remember? Sally woke with tears on her face. Not tears of pain, but of defiance. The child she was not allowed to keep. Sally Crane did not know exactly when hope returned to her life. Hope was dangerous on the plantation. It arrived quietly, without permission, and if noticed, it was taken away. At first it was only exhaustion, then dizziness, then mornings where the world felt heavier than usual. The older women noticed before Sally did. They saw the way her hands rested protectively over her stomach, the way her steps slowed, the way her eyes carried both fear and something fragile, something close to light. One night an old woman whispered, "You're carrying life." The words felt unreal. Life, on a land built on suffering. Sally lay awake that night, staring into the dark, afraid to breathe too, deeply, as if even acknowledging the child might cause it to disappear. She did not cry. She did not smile. She waited. The months passed slowly, painfully. Work did not stop for pregnancy. The fields did not soften. The sun did not show mercy. Sally worked until her back screamed and her legs trembled. Sometimes she felt movement inside her, a small reminder, a quiet promise. At night, she whispered words she had never been taught to say aloud. Please, let him live. Let me keep him. The child came during a storm. Rain pounded the roof like fists, drowning out Sally's cries. The women gathered around her, forming a circle of protection made only of bodies and courage. No doctor came, no master waited, only pain and determination. When the baby finally arrived, he did not cry right away. Sally's heart stopped. Then a small sound, fragile, alive. They placed him in her arms, warm and shaking. For the first time since her mother died, Sally cried freely. She named him Isaiah, a name whispered, not announced, a name meant only for her heart. Isaiah changed everything. He slept against her chest while she hummed songs Ruth once sang. Songs without words, songs that carried memory instead of language. Isaiah smiled when Sally smiled. He gripped her finger as if afraid the world might take her away. For a brief, dangerous time, Sally allowed herself to imagine a future. Teaching him to walk, teaching him his name, teaching him how to survive. Hope wrapped around her like warmth, and that was when the plantation noticed. Plantations noticed everything. The way Sally worked harder, the way she shielded the child, the way hope softened her face. One morning Sally heard the sound she feared most. Wheels. A wagon rolled into the yard, its wood creaking under weight that did not yet include her child, but soon would. Men spoke quietly. Papers were passed. Hands were shaken. Sally stood frozen, Isaiah pressed to her chest. She already knew. She just didn't want to believe. An overseer approached. "Hand him over." Sally didn't move. Her arms tightened instinctively. Her heart raced. For one impossible moment she thought about running. But chains, guards, guns, reality closed in fast. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. The word felt small, weak, useless. They pried Isaiah from her arms. He cried then. A sharp, terrified sound that cut through her like a blade. Sally screamed. She screamed until her throat burned. She screamed until her knees gave out. She screamed Isaiah's name like it might pull him back. But the wagon did not stop. Dust rose behind it, and Isaiah disappeared down the road. Sally ran after them. She fell. She stumbled. She begged. Her hands clawed at the dirt as the wagon became smaller, then distant, then gone. The field swallowed the sound of her voice. When it was over, Sally lay in the dust, empty. That night she did not sleep. She did not eat. She did not pray. She stared into the dark and replayed Isaiah's face again and again, afraid time would steal it. From that night on, Sally Crane no longer feared pain. She no longer feared death. She feared forgetting. Days passed. The plantation continued as if nothing had happened. Cotton still grew. The bell still rang. The world moved forward without Isaiah. Sally moved like a shadow. She worked. She breathed. She survived. But something inside her had changed forever. Hope had been taken, and in its place, something stronger grew. Resolve. One evening, Elijah sat beside her. "They can sell bodies," he said quietly, "but they can't sell what you remember." Sally nodded. She whispered Isaiah's name into the night. Again, and again, and again. She would not let him vanish, even if the world tried. The escape that cost everything. After Isaiah was taken, Sally Crane became very quiet. Not the quiet of obedience, but the quiet of someone who had nothing left to lose. The plantation mistook this silence for acceptance. They were wrong. At night, Sally listened. She listened to footsteps, to whispered arguments, to prayers spoken too softly for heaven to hear. She listened to Elijah. Elijah had lived long enough to know that slavery did not end gently. It ended violently, or not at all. "The land remembers blood," he once said. "It don't forget easily." The plan formed slowly, not in daylight, not openly. It formed in glances, in pauses between breaths, in the shared understanding that tomorrow could not be trusted. Fire would be the signal. Fire was dangerous, but so was staying. The night came without warning. The moon hid behind clouds, as if even the sky did not want to witness what was about to happen. Sally lay awake, heart pounding, Isaiah's name echoing in her chest. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation. Then she smelled it. Smoke, at first faint, then stronger. Shouts erupted across the plantation. Flames rose in the cotton fields, bright and hungry, devouring the crops that had devoured so many lives. That was the signal. "Run!" Elijah's voice was calm. but his eyes were not. Sally ran. The night tore at her as she moved. Branches scraped her skin. Thorns ripped her dress. The ground shifted beneath her feet, uneven and unforgiving. Behind her, dogs barked. Not animals. Monsters trained to hunt hope. People ran in every direction. Some tripped. Some were caught. Some screamed. Chains rattled. Whips cracked. Guns fired. The forest echoed with terror. Sally didn't look back. She couldn't. If she stopped, she would die. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Her heart felt like it might tear itself free from her chest. She ran for Isaiah, for Ruth, for every name she had carved into her memory. A scream cut through the night. Then another. Sally heard someone fall behind her, a body hitting the ground. A cry cut short. She knew better than to turn around. Freedom did not wait. The river appeared suddenly, dark and wide. Sally threw herself into the water without thinking. The cold shocked her breath from her lungs. She fought the current, pulling herself forward with desperate strength. Dogs reached the bank, barking furiously, but they did not follow. She crawled out on the other side and collapsed, shaking violently. The fire's glow faded behind her. For the first time in her life, the bell did not ring. Dawn came slowly. Gray light crept across the sky, revealing the damage. Bruises, cuts, blood. Sally tried to stand and fell. Footsteps approached. Her heart raced. She expected chains. Instead, she saw blue. Uniforms, Union soldiers. They watched her carefully, weapons lowered but ready. One of them spoke gently. "You're safe." The words felt unreal. They gave her water, bread, a blanket. They asked her name. Sally hesitated. Names had always been dangerous. But then she remembered the wood, the carving, the promise. "Sally Crane," she said. No one corrected her. No one laughed. No one took it away. Freedom felt strange. There were no bells, no overseers. But there were ghosts. Elijah never crossed the river. Many didn't. Freedom had a price, and it had been paid in blood. That night Sally lay beneath open sky. No roof, no chains. She whispered Isaiah's name one last time, not in pain, but in promise. What history tried to forget. Freedom did not arrive with celebration. There were no drums, no cheering crowds, no sudden feeling of joy. Freedom came to Sally Crane, quietly, like a question she did not yet know how to answer. The morning after her escape, she woke beneath an open sky. The earth was cold, the blanket thin, and her body ached in places she did not know could hurt. For a moment, just a moment, she panicked. There was no bell, no voice shouting orders, no sound of chains, only birds. The silence felt wrong. For most of her life, silence had meant danger, punishment, something bad about to happen. Now it stretched around her without teeth, without threat. Sally sat up slowly, half expecting someone to grab her, to tell her she had dreamed it all. But no one came. Freedom was real, and it terrified her. The Union camp moved within days. Sally moved with it, unsure where else to go. Soldiers spoke to her kindly, but kindness felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. They asked questions she did not know how to answer. "Where's your family? Where are you from? What will you do now?" She wanted to say "my son." She wanted to say Isaiah, but the words stayed trapped in her chest. She did not know where he was. She did not know if he lived. She did not even know if he still remembered her voice. So she said nothing. Freedom gave Sally choices, but not direction. She traveled when she could, worked when she had to. Washing clothes, cleaning homes, cooking meals she was never allowed to eat fully. People paid her pennies and called it fairness. Still, it was more than she had ever owned. At night, she slept lightly. Every sound woke her. Every shadow looked like a memory reaching out to reclaim her. She dreamed of Isaiah often. Sometimes he was still a baby, crying as the wagon pulled away. Sometimes he was older, calling her name. Sometimes he stood silently, watching her from across a field she could never cross. Each time she woke, her chest felt hollow. Freedom had not reunited her with her child. It had only given her time to miss him longer. Years passed. Sally aged faster than she should have. Slavery had already stolen her youth. Freedom simply revealed the cost. She returned to Alabama once. Not to the plantation, but near it. The land looked the same. The fields still stretched endlessly. The house still stood. The dirt still remembered. But something was missing. Chains. Sally stood at the edge of the land and felt nothing resembling victory. Only a quiet sadness for all the lives the soil had swallowed. She whispered names into the wind. Ruth, Elijah, Isaiah. The wind carried them away. But Sally believed the land heard. She never stopped looking for her son. Whenever she traveled, she listened for stories. A boy sold south. A young man with her eyes. A name that sounded like Isaiah, or had been changed to survive. Sometimes hope rose. Sometimes it collapsed. Most times there was nothing. History was careless with children like Isaiah. It erased them easily. As Sally grew older, she began telling stories, not for comfort, but for preservation. She told children about names, about how important it was to remember who you were, even when the world tried to rename you. She taught them letters when no one was watching. Slow, careful lessons traced in dirt and charcoal. Words last, she said, even when people don't. Some listened, some forgot, but Sally kept speaking anyway. One winter evening, a young woman asked her, "Do you hate them?" Sally thought for a long time before answering. "Hate takes energy," she finally said. "I use mine to remember." Her body weakened with age, but her voice did not. She walked slower. Her hands shook, but her memory stayed sharp. She remembered the bell, the whip, the fire, the river. She remembered freedom not as a miracle, but as a wound that slowly healed, without ever closing completely. On her final night, Sally lay beneath a quilt stitched by hands much younger than her own. Someone asked if she wanted a prayer. Sally shook her head. "I've already spoken enough names," she whispered. Her breath slowed, and then it stopped. There was no grave marker for Sally Crane, no photograph, no official record. History did not bother to write her down. But stories traveled, from mouth to mouth, from whisper to whisper, about a woman who survived when she was not meant to, about a mother who never forgot, about a name carved into wood and into time. Some lives are not written in books. They are written in endurance, and sometimes that is enough.